Hey, hello, good morning everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Todd Nauck, and you're at the Todd Nauck YouTube art channel. So, today's art live stream. Thanks for joining me, everybody. We're going to continue this Rocket Raccoon sketch cover. Hopefully you joined me for yesterday's line art video where we did the pencil sketch and inked art. If you missed it, it's still here on my channel. You can check it out. Today we're going to add Copic marker color. And I'll share my Copic codes. Now, if you don't have Copic markers, color with whatever you have, whatever drawing you're working on. If you're working, I know a lot of people are drawing along while I do my art live streams, either working on their own projects or trying to draw what I've drawn here. So use whatever you have. It's okay. Colored pencils, crayons, watercolors, other brands of art markers. It's totally cool. It's totally cool. So you don't have to use Copics. It's not required whatsoever. Even drawing on a sketch cover is not required whatsoever. The only requirement is to maybe have fun, and even that's a pretty loose requirement. Have fun as best as you can, is what I say. A lot of grace here, a lot of grace. So I'll share my Copic codes and some of my tips and tricks while I go, and I'll do my best to try to respond to some questions and comments while I'm working here. So feel free to continue to post your comments as we go here. So yeah, it's Friday morning, May 15th. May 15th. I almost said March. That's how this stay-at-home thing has affected me. I already have trouble keeping up with what time and day it is in normal life, but with this stay-at-home order, it's now all sorts of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff for all you Doctor Who fans. But yeah, main thing is we're just going to have some fun. Let's get to work. Hope everyone's doing well during this stay-at-home season. We're wrapping up week 9 of these art live streams. Readjust the lighting here, and we're good to go. Maybe pull back just a smidge. All right. Like I said, I'll share my Copic codes just in case those of you who might be using Copic markers as well in your arts and want to know, hey, what color is that? Well, hopefully I'll remember to say the Copic code and you can add that to your Copic arsenal. If you're using any other type of color, totally cool. Use whatever you have, you know, at your disposal. Greens, browns. We're going to use a lot of greens and a lot of browns. I'm going to be, this is the classic Rocket Raccoon costume. This is his one from the 1980s, from his 4-issue miniseries drawn by Mike Mignola, who would later go on to create Hellboy. I think we've all heard of Hellboy. So he's going to be in his classic green costume, which was the first costume I discovered Rocket Raccoon, back when he wasn't quite as popular as he is today. So we're going to start with his fur, and we're going to start with the brown parts of his fur first. So I'm going to be working in some different shades of brown and some gray into his fur. We're going for the classic comic book look here. So I'm starting with some E25. I'm going to do these feathery types of strokes here to really kind of get a nice furry sort of texture. So this is probably my mid-range brown. I'm kind of working mid. I'll probably go darker and lighter with other shades of brown and gray as we go. So considering the light source from above, so the light's going to hit right there on top of his head, maybe a little bit of a ridge there through his brow, right on the outsides of his ears. I just think about where is the light going to hit? That's where I'm going to want to put my highlight. And where is the light not hitting? That's where I'm going to put my shadow. So as the light comes down, it's hitting his snout, maybe the upper parts of his lip, but then as we get down here to his chest, these underarms here, even with my line work, I indicated where shadow will be in the open areas. I know that's where I'm going to fade towards my highlight. So we're going to work some of the brown and gray into his fur here. We're going to have white around we have the dark parts of his eyes, then the white trim, which kind of fades down here into the body of his fur. So I can use this brown for the darker parts, pulling away into what will be the highlight area. Now, this will most likely be my mid-range sort of brown, so I'm sure I'll be coming in with definitely some lighter browns and maybe some darker browns. And then some grays as well to give it kind of a grayish brown sort of color. So with the thigh here, the thigh is coming forward. So the light's really going to hit on the top of that thigh, right? And then his knee is kind of facing us. As much of a knee as a raccoon has. Some sort of joint, if not considered a knee as in a human sense. So since the lower part of his leg is really tucked under there, we're going to have darker colors because it's going to be more shadowed. So always think of what's overlapping something. Will the light get to that? If not, then you can put heavier color and shadow. Darker color and shadow. Keeping in mind the volume of his legs, or any body part here, the arms, kind of how it curves around. That's something I'm going to want to think about. How it curves around, and how can I create that sense of mass? You know, he's not a big character like the Hulk or Thor, but he still has mass. You know, he's a little guy, but he still occupies space. He still has a roundedness to him, and there is his level of mass and volume. So I want to try to reflect that in my rendering here in color, much as I had tried to do with the line art. I'm going to pull this brown into the ring parts of his tail, but I'll probably come in with some more gray and darker colors into the rings, but I want this base brown to actually go into that brown there for nice consistent shade to his tail. But I'm going to keep in mind the light is coming from above, so it's going to hit this top portion of his tail. So the bottom chunk is going to have the darker color. Really just wanting to texturize with the marker here. Letting that brush tip really create some nice fuzzy, furry textures. All right, so I'm gonna go to a bit of a lighter shade of brown. I'm gonna try an E5 here. Start to move from that previous shade of brown into the more open areas. So you can see the transition in the color of the fur. How it goes from dark to light. That's the intention here. Not going to leave much white on the board here in his fur. This will probably be the lightest shade of brown that I use, because it is pretty much one of the lightest shades of brown that I own. So, don't know if I can go much lighter than this. So I'm just going to use up that real estate as we head towards the upper edge on Rocket's fur here. I'm going to come in with a few more, at least one more shade of brown here to render this out, and then we'll start adding some grays too. I do have a pretty, actually I do have a lighter shade of brown here. It's in the E3 family, E3-1. Let's try adding some of that too. Yeah, it's very subtle. I don't know if it's even translating in the video, but it's very, very subtly a slightly lighter shade of brown, which is going to work great to just kind of finish off the kind of highlight area. Not putting a big, bright white highlight like I did on Iron Man last week. Don't really want that here for Rocket's fur. He's I'm sure Rocket grooms to a certain degree, but he's not going to have that same kind of lustrous hair that we might see on like a Thor or a Mary Jane, a Wonder Woman or a Superman. You know, we're probably not going to see a nice bright highlight with that healthy Pantene Pro V hair. So, you know, he's a critter, so his fur is going to be a different kind of texture. It's okay if you want to put a white highlight through your Rocket or whatever critter you're drawing. That's totally cool. I'm just thinking, I don't know if I want that for this. Let's see. I want to come in with a slightly different shade of brown. A little E55 here, just to kind of darken up some of these shadows. Then I'm going to add some neutral grays to his fur, because his fur is kind of a grayish brown, oftentimes. Let's put a little darker browns through here. All right, now let's come in with some neutral grays. I'm going to start with a neutral 3 here. Just kind of give it a bit more of a muted sort of look to it. Not quite such a bright brown, but more of a kind of a grayish brown, which kind of plays more to Rocket's character. I think the browns I've used here, while they are the right browns to get me started, he looks a little bit too Chip 'n Dale, you know, the Chip 'n Dale chipmunks with this shade of brown. And I want him to look a little more gritty. So bringing this gray in over these browns kind of gritties him up a little bit, kind of darkens him up in a tonal sort of sense, like in the mood of the character. It makes him look a little less cutesy. If I was doing an illustration of Chip 'n Dale, then I would just stick with these browns and not really drop in this much gray on those characters. But for Rocket, I want him to look like a grungy space pirate, for lack of a better term. You know, he's getting into trouble, getting into scrapes, so he's not going to have the brightest, cleanest looking fur. I want it to be a bit more dingy, because in space, no one can hear you bathe. All right, and then let's lighten that up to a neutral gray 1 for some of the lighter brown areas, just to kind of smooth out that transition. So we have a nice kind of grayish brown here, rather than a traditional bright brown. How am I doing today? Thank you, I'm doing quite well, doing well. It's Friday, and yeah, don't really have much planned for the weekend because of COVID-19. I'll probably just stay at home as I have been these past many weeks. But you know what? I'm doing good. I'm doing well. It's fun to be able to do these live streams, hang out with everyone, draw and chat. So that means a lot. So I appreciate everyone being here. Thanks for your presence and your support. So I'm doing well. How are you guys doing? How are you? Okay, that's just the right shade of grayish brown there. It's not too bright and cute, but it's got just the right amount of dinginess to them. All right, now let's work on the white portion of his facial feature here. I saw a question here. Was I ever afraid to color my original artwork? No, not really. I mean, I've been drawing since I was a little kid. And, you know, when you're a little kid, you just draw and you just have fun with it. And I just kind of kept that mentality going into my teen years, young adult years, into my adult years. So I'm going to come in with some cool gray 2, starting off. Kind of get a base going here. So I didn't really get too afraid. It's just, you know, just kind of go for it. I just like, you know, it's a piece of art. If it's a sketch. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, well, I'll just try again. You know, it's like, I guess I was never too afraid of ruining a piece of art, because I've ruined pieces of art for sure. You know, I'm working on something goes wrong, and sometimes I've had to start over because I could not rescue the art. And that happens. That's just the nature of living on Earth, being a human, you know, being a human who lives on Earth, I should say. So I guess I never really had a fear that kept me from wanting to color my art. After doing the line work, it's just like, color's the next stage. Let's go for it. I'll do the best job I can, and hopefully it all works out well. Now a little cool gray 4, just for the parts furthest away from the light. Maybe a little bit here in the brow. Starts to transition into the fur on his chest. Let's see, let's come in with some warm gray. I want to put a little warm gray in here, warm gray 2. I'm going to start to mix my grays here to create new shades of gray. Have I ever thought of creating my own comic book? I have. Actually, I have. I did a series called Wild Guard. So this comic book I created back as an art student in the 1990s. It's about a reality TV superhero team. And in 2003, I brought that concept to Image Comics after I finished Young Justice and did it as a 12-issue series. 12 issues currently. I hope to add more to the stories to that world at some point. You can find the first 6-issue miniseries, Wild Guard Casting Call, in trade paperback. And yeah, they're all my creator-owned characters, and I hope to do more with those characters sometime in the future. Okay, we're going to add a little cool gray here to his teeth, since I'm working with the cool grays. So the teeth further back inside the mouth, not going to get as much light, so they're going to get to be more gray. A little bit of underneath that top lip. And we're going to come in with a little warm gray 1. Just to kind of dingy them up a little bit, because raccoon oral hygiene may not be the best. Actually, I'm going to add a little cool gray 1 to the whites of his eyes here, just at the top, just to round out the sphericalness of his eyeball. Do I like the MCU? Absolutely I do. Those are some of my favorite movies. Faux show. Let's see. Well, we'll work on the dark parts of his fur here in his face, as well as his ringtail. So let's see. I'm going to come in with some neutral gray. I'm going to start kind of dark. We're going to start neutral gray 4, I think, because I can always go darker if this isn't dark enough. Yeah, this is good to start with as a base, and I will be coming in with some darker shades. So we're just going to pull this neutral gray just over all these dark lines, kind of fading out as we move towards the white over there. Who am I drawing? This is Rocket Raccoon. He is a space critter. He was featured in the movie as one of the regular team members of the superhero team Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm drawing him in his 1980s costume from his 1980s miniseries, which was the first time I discovered Rocket Raccoon as a kid, back before he was a member, or they had the idea to put him on the Guardians of the Galaxy team. He was not in the first two incarnations of the Guardians of the Galaxy in Marvel Comics. Okay, we're going to run this neutral gray 4 through the ringtail. Going over this gray here. Just kind of following along with the line art. And just letting that brush tip just kind of dance back and forth across the board to create that darker part. I'll still come in with still a darker shade of gray to come. Let's bump this up to a neutral gray 5. See how this works for the even darker around his eyes. I want darker around his eyes and fading lighter towards the light, or the white of his fur. I guess to the light as well, but really like it dark up in there. Really makes his eyeballs pop. A little darker underneath his chin as it fades down to his chest area. Then this neutral gray 5 here in the further parts of his rings. Start to create a fade from dark to light. All right, and you know what? I want to bring in just a little neutral gray 6 here in his tail just to really embolden. Is that the word I want to use? Really just add some darker shadow to the ring. Maybe that's just a better way to say this sentence. Maybe just a little bit here under his eyes. All right, this fur is coming together. Let's add some color to his nose. I'm going to start with a neutral gray 3. Going to kind of hit the front of the nose. A little more so, and the light's hitting on the top of his nose. So I want there to be a more of a highlight on his nose there, because it's a different texture than his fur. It's more of his kind of rough flesh. So there would be a little bit more of a highlight there, I would believe. Let's come in with a little darker shade of gray, a little neutral 4, kind of up here in the nostrils, kind of shadow those out a little bit. So we kind of can transition from the neutral 4 to the neutral 3 to the white highlight. Let's see. Let's finish the inside of his mouth. What say? I'm going to start with a really dark pink, RV95. Just going to run this underneath his tongue because it's further away from the light. Maybe start the ridge, the transition fade in his mouth. So right there across the top of that. A little RV32. Maybe run this through the mouth as well. And then we'll try some R20. I'm going to grab some cool gray here. Go ahead and add the shadows to it. So we'll start with a little cool gray 2. Put that there on the back of his tongue for a bit more shadow, because the back of the tongue is not going to be as visible to the light or have as much light hitting it. Come here, you. Cool gray 4. for the shadow underneath the tongue. Maybe a little bit on the very, very furthest back part of his tongue. Actually, now that I look at that, the pink tongue is a little too pink. So I'm going to bring some cool gray 1 over that just to kind of mute it out a little bit. Are there any other Copic markers that I have other than the ones I use a lot? Yeah, I do. I do have some Copic markers that don't fit in my case that I use for certain colors, but these are the colors that I use at conventions because I can't take every marker with me. So they're the ones I know the best, and they really work well for my approach to drawing the superheroes and villains that I draw for commission style pieces. But I do have other colors that I do use here at home. Sometimes I use them for certain illustrations when necessary. Yeah, so I probably have an extra 30 colors that don't fit in my Copic marker wallets. All right, let's give him his brown eyes. Kind of brown, yeah, brown eyes. Brown, maybe some gray in there as well. So I'm gonna start with some E25 and putting the dark parts right there next to that highlight and leaving the opposite side open for a lighter gray. I'm going to use one of my kind of darker skin tones, an E13, to give him a vibrant brown eye. So it looks kind of just like that. So you can see the transition from dark to light in a very drastic sort of way. Really gives his eyes some pop. Okay, I think we're good to move to his costume now, his uniform. So we're going to use a series of greens because his 1980s look was some dark and light green. So we're going to start with his main shirt and trunks here, which are kind of a darker green. So we'll start with that. So I'm going to use some YG45. And so I'm going to work from dark to light for this, for his shirt. So if we consider the light source coming from above, then the top parts of his uniform will be lighter. The opposite sides will be darker, or if anything overlaps, like his head overlaps a little bit, this flap of his collar overlaps. Then as we start to move down his torso here, there's going to be less light hitting it depending on the angle of the fold of his shirt. So I consider the line to be the bottom part of that fold, so I can just create these swaths of color to help convey the wrinkle and crinkle to his uniform in the way that he is moving. It's creating kind of that bend. And I like to study photos of clothing to see how cloth can bend. And then I can use my imagination to fill in the gaps. And here for his trunks, it's going to be less light hitting them because the further his body is moving further away from the light, so there's going to be less light highlighting his trunks. Except for maybe some of the wrinkles as they bend towards the light. Maybe a little pull from the buttons there. So that gets add just a little bit more there to the front of his sleeve. First sleeve, I should say. He has like these layered sleeves, dark gray and then dark green and then a lighter green. Now I think I want to come in with some G14. Yeah, G14. It's kind of like my next shade of green. Kind of moving from that darker shade of green towards the light. Always working towards the light. Just going lighter and lighter and lighter with whatever color family I'm working with, whether it be the browns, whether it be these greens, whatever color it is. Where do I buy my Copics? Let's see, there's an art supply store here in Southern California. where I go shopping to buy most of my Copics. Sometimes I buy them online. If my art supply store, I almost said comic shop, if my art supply store doesn't have the color marker or refill I need, then I'll go like onto Amazon or Google Shopping and see if I can find the color I need to replenish my collection. Nice thing about Copics is the ink is refillable. So you buy one marker and then you buy a refill bottle of the ink, and you can get about 10 to 12 refills out of that bottle. So it makes these markers a little more cost effective in the long term, but it's yeah, they are a bit expensive here to start off with. So that's where I get my markers there, is at my local brick and mortar art supply stores. Is the first place I look. Let's see, and then my next lighter shade of green, I think I'm gonna go, let's see what I have here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with my G02. Yeah, G02 to kind of finish off his main shirt here. Just kind of letting all three of these greens kind of blend together to kind of form the darker green portion of his uniform. Now the inside of his collar here will be the lighter shade that we'll use for his gloves, his holster, the secondary sleeve. What I'm going to use for that green is a YG03 to start with. Just kind of run along those folds of his shirt, but for the collar. Just thinking of all the shapes that it creates and how can I utilize shadow and highlight based on the shapes that are created from the folds. Again, that comes with a lot of study and a lot of practice. This is the underside of his glove, so we're going to pull towards the light, which will be hitting there on the top. Maybe there's some reflected light here on this back side of his glove. If you just tuned in, I'm drawing Rocket Raccoon in his classic 1980s uniform before he became a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And he wore a green uniform of a dark green and a light green. Two different shades of green in his uniform. See, and then we have this holster here, which is this light green. Okay, I think that has us pretty well set for this first stage of the light green, just kind of going over some portions. Just kind of giving a little second coat in certain places. Put that through the buttons there. Okay. Now I need to take this to a little bit of a lighter shade of green. I'm going to come in with some G40. Start to blend these two different shades of green together. So I color over that previous color with this lighter color to create a nice saturated transition. It also kind of mutes the that first light green I used. It kind of mutes it back a little bit so it's not quite so super bright. It's still lighter than the main part of his shirt, but it doesn't quite look quite as candy-coated green. Kind of tamps it back a little bit, which kind of makes for, kind of fits better with Rocket's character. Okay. Let's see, let's go ahead and tackle the little red dot here on his uniform. That'll just be a couple of shades of red here I'm going to utilize. So I'm going to start with some R27, my favorite. These are my two favorite shades of red for when I do my illustrations. You probably see me use these colors on my Iron Man, Spider-Man, Deadpool, Superman. Anyone who has red in their costumes, a traditional red, these are the reds I'm going to use. R27, then an R24. And it's as simple as that. Now for his pouches, they're kind of almost bordering more on like a turquoise sort of color. Gotta see, might have to use a couple of different colors to create this color. So I'm looking at, here's my scratch paper. So I'm looking at this BG34 and a BG01 to kind of create this different shade, because that's what the BG01 looks like. It's kind of like a light blue. BG34 is kind of this bluish green. But I want something that kind of is in between those two, so I'll make my own by layering these two colors. So I'll start with the BG34 because it's got a bit more green to it. And Copic markers are made to blend like this. Not all marker brands are made to blend to this degree. I don't know if you'll be able to get the same kind of blending effect by blending layering a light blue and a turquoise green sort of color together. You're more than welcome to try. I'm all for trial and error, but try on a scratch sheet first, like I just did here, to make sure it's the right shade end result. Just do a small little swatch there, and then I can tell, okay, this will or will not work. I can experiment on a separate piece of board to find what I like, and then I can then commit to that based on the results. So these are two of the colors that are not in my wallet. People were asking about earlier in the live stream here. So just adding a little extra blue to this turquoise color, just to try to reflect what I see in the reference material. See what his costume looks like from the 1980s series. I got these little white highlights here that I need to move into a lighter color, so I'm just going to push a little bit of blue up into that. And I'm going to come in with a much lighter shade of kind of a greenish color. I'm going to use this G00. again from my overflow arsenal of Copic markers, just to fill in those white areas because I don't want a big bright white highlight on these pouches. So almost done with Rocket himself. Then we move to his laser pistols. So I need to color his belt and his buckle. So we're going to come in with some neutral gray 5 for his belt. Start from the black area and pull to the center, where it would be more of a highlight. Start from this dark section and pulling away to where it's a bit lighter. Then let's take that to a neutral gray 3 to transition from that shade of gray out. And then he's got a gold belt buckle. So I'm going to start with, what? I'm missing did not put the correct marker away in my wallet. Sorry, gang. Just kind of freaked out. It's like, why is there a hole in my wallet? Actually, there's 2 holes in my wallet. Oh, that's because I'm actually holding the color I'm about to use. All right, so we have some Y21. It's kind of a amber shade here. What do they call this one here? They call it Buttercup Yellow. Buttercup Yellow. One of my favorite bands from the 1990s, Buttercup Yellow. Actually, that sounds more like a 70s band, huh? Or like late 60s. They appeared at Woodstock, Buttercup Yellow. They were so good. I think they opened for the Cowsills. All right, let's come in with some Y13, which is called Lemon Yellow. And then some Y00. What's the name of this one? Barium Yellow. Wow. Okay. Let's go ahead and add some of the gray tone shadows. Oh, and actually he has yellow buckles or snaps on his belt, so we'll use that Y21 again to put those snaps on his pouches. Let's come in and start adding some shadow to Rocket, then we'll color his pistols last, and then we'll do a background behind him. So, going to start with some cool gray 1 for some of the lighter things like his belt here. Trying to make it look reflective like metal, so I'm running that kind of horizon shadow through the center of it. For the greens and these light blues, I'm going to come in start to use a cool gray 2 down these knuckles here, that meaty part of his palm. Down kind of the center of his glove here. The front part of that sleeve. Underneath the chin area. Down the inside of this holster, because it's so close to his leg. These dark parts shadowed out from the light, the inside of his thigh, of the strap. Let's hit the sides here of his pouches and where the flap overlaps. And start to run some through the wrinkles here, bottom. Do the same for this side here. So these grays can give some nice kind of somewhat realistic shadow and really kind of shape and form out each object on Rocket, like the thumb, the palm of his hand, the trigger finger, the fingers wrapped around his pistol handle, through the glove here, kind of right down the center here. Keeping in mind that this glove is kind of curved. It curves around like a big cone. So I'm going to shape the shadow to go around it, to convey that sense of roundedness. Maybe add a little bit more over here. Okay, I'm going to bump this up. I want to go a little darker with some of these shadows here on these elements I've added shadow to. So I'm going to add a little cool gray 3, just going one step darker for some of the portions that are further away from the light source. Because that's the thing I'm thinking about. What's further away from the light source? What is being covered up? So that would cast a shadow. That's my mode of thinking. Like inside this bottom part of the holster here, a lot of shadow based on my line art, so I know to put a lot of color there. Inside of the thigh, further away from the light source, it's going to have more shadow. Maybe bump up the sides, the shadow on the sides of these, maybe through the wrinkles there, maybe running right across the bottom, maybe around the snaps of his pouches. These are the things I'm going to think about or consider. Who am I drawing? I'm drawing Rocket Raccoon. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you're here. This is Rocket Raccoon from Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, though I'm drawing him in his costume from the 1980s before he joined the Guardians of the Galaxy, when he was just a space adventuring raccoon. Unaffiliated at that time. Okay, now I'm going to want to go even darker with the gray for the darker green part of his uniform here. So I'm going to start with a cool gray 4 and see how dark that is. Might be just the right shade for this shade of gray. So I'm going to consider like how this flap of his collar overlaps. So putting a heavy shadow under that gives it depth. Where his head kind of hunkers down over his shoulders, put a little darker gray there, and now his head is going to pop more on the page. It's going to frame him. Do the same on this side. Then as we move further away from the light source, with these folds, we're going to get that the wrinkles and the depth. Underneath those pouches right there, it's going to make those pouches pop off of his trunks and thigh. Do the same on this side. That belt would cast a little bit of a shadow, just a little thin shadow. Bottoms of his trunks, that's where the sun don't shine, so we're going to have a little more shadow down there. Maybe even use some of this in his fur a little bit. Here at the overlap of the collar. All right, so it's got Rocket rendered out there pretty well. Next up, let's work on these pistols. I think I'm going to use. I'm going to start with some cool grays. I think I'm going to start with a cool gray 2. We'll start with this pistol and then we'll go over to that pistol. So this is a kind of a more cone-like shape, or almost like a curved pyramid because it's angled. So I'm going to think of that. I'm going to think light source coming from above, probably a reflected light coming this way. So it's going to reflect the horizon right through here, because this is a shiny sort of metal. So that's my horizon. It's going to kind of fade here and leaving an open area over there for the reflected light. So highlight coming here, reflected light coming there. And I can move this gray. I'm going to work with different colors of gray and actually add some different colors to these pistols. So thinking of the shape of the pistol, I can think, where is the light hitting? Where would there be more shadow? The same as I was doing with Rocket's hand, arm, chest, head, tail. Still that kind of mentality. I'm thinking of. Then we'll put a color inside of his laser. So I'm going to come in with a little darker gray. I'm going to try some cool gray 4. Really want to play that horizon line through here a bit more. Starts to give it that shiny sort of metallic look. And some of the places that might be further away from the light, it's going to have more dark. Maybe darker inside this little disc here. Maybe his grip here on his pistol is going to be a little darker of a gray. Okay, so that gives us some gray to work with here. Now I want to bring in some sort of color to his pistols. And I'm thinking I want to experiment here with some colors that I might not often use. So I want to try purple. Usually I would do like blue. If I want to make these look really silvery, I'll use like a really light shade of blue. But I think I want to use purple here instead. To give it a kind of a different look, an otherworldly sort of look. Because who knows where Rocket got these pistols? Who knows what kind of metal these are made of? Or space-age polymers of some sort. So I'm using purple here for a more... to really amp up the fantasy, the science fantasy of it all. And also the purple, I think, kind of complements these greens. It pairs well with the greens. Let's see. Let's put a little colored highlight here inside of the... so that was the V01 purple, if I didn't say that before. And this is the YR01, a light shade of orange. Just to put some color inside of his pistol here. Maybe a little YR12 to kind of create a darker color there, kind of give that some dimension. Now I'm going to use a really bright shade of pink, an RV13 for the center, like the light up of the laser area inside. And I'm going to fade that to an RV52. Still leaving a little tiny white highlight in the center there. The most concentrated part of the laser. So, you know, I think we can leave that one pistol just as is. I kind of like how that looks. Now, we have his other pistol. Now, people were saying, he has one holster over here, but no holster over there. That's just the way he looked in his design. He was holding 2 pistols, but he only had one holster. This one, maybe he keeps in his belt on his back, or maybe he picked it up from someone else, you know? Maybe he just, you know, took down some guard and grabbed his pistol. You know, Rocket, he's not shy about taking someone else's pistol, so we'll see if he ever gets the Winter Soldier's gun. All right, so for this side, we're going to do a different shade of gray, just to kind of mix it up, and we'll use some neutral gray. We'll start with a neutral 3 and do the very similar approach. So I'm keeping in mind light source coming from above, reflected light coming from this direction. Just coloring some of the different sections and portions of the gun. Now a little neutral 2 for inside of here. Going to eat up a bit more of this real estate, or maybe through the site here, maybe there's a little bit of gray right there. Let's see, I want to come in with some neutral 4, a darker shade of neutral gray to really pump up this, this horizon line shadow. Maybe a little darker shadow here of where the barrel connects. Maybe some of these little dealy boppers, technical term there, dealy bopper. A little shadow underneath that finger guard through the grip here. We'll just make that a little darker for a little more contrast. Maybe underneath this part here that goes over the back of his hand, a little darker. Did I design his pistols for the drawing, or did you use reference for them? I made these up. These are strictly from my imagination. I did not use I did not draw the same pistols that Mike Mignola drew in the Rocket Raccoon series that I was basing this uniform on. I decided to make up my own pistols just because it's fun. Let's see. I think I will bring some light blue through this. Over this gray, so I'm going to bring some B000. And let the blue kind of mix with these grays here to create this shade of bluish gray. Let's see, I think I want to do, I'm going to put a red laser inside of there. So we'll take that R27. To start things off, and then that will fade to an RV13. We used the pink over here. We're going to use this red to pink to get a transition from red to pink to white. For a nice bright color inside that pistol. Let's use this, shade of B01, just to put a few little bits and bops right there. Use this really bright shade of blue through the horizon reflection gray right there like that. Okay, so that gives them 2 different pistols there. Kind of gives the eye a little bit more to see in a subtle way. Not too overly done. Maybe use this B01 there in the barrel there, just to really ramp up the blue amidst the gray. I think that works, that works. All right, now I want to put a background sort of element behind Rocket, but I don't want to fill up the whole cover. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but sometimes it's fun just to do a background shape element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a panel border using my T-square here. I'll just take a pencil here to start with. I'm going to run a line all the way across behind Rocket. I'm going to come down here, say right about to there, and run this line on the bottom side. So I've created this framing element behind Rocket here. So we still have the white of the board, but we have just a little bit of a framing element behind him so that we can give just a little hint of a background behind him. A hint of a background is what I'm looking for. So I think I'm going to do one of my space nebula because people seem to enjoy my space nebula. So we'll do another one of those. If you haven't seen some of my art live streams or art videos I've posted where I do my space nebula, well, this will be your first time to see how I approach doing that. Let's see. It's going to extend to the edge of the page. So I'll put a little bleeder board right there so I can color over this without coloring over onto the comic book on the inside. See, this is these sketch covers have an actual comic inside. This is the actual Rocket Raccoon #1. This is the series by Scotty Young that he wrote. So let's start to work on this space nebula. So I'm going to have, sorry, I'm kind of thinking this through of how I want the space to break up, because there'll be the blackness of space, but then that will blend towards color. So if I have black here on these edges, maybe a little black through here, a little black through there, I'm kind of mapping it out in my mind. Because I want it to fade to kind of to the white is kind of what I'm thinking. You'll kind of see how it comes together more as I go. So I'm going to take my black Copic marker, and we're going to kind of start to cut in the black portions of space. So it's going to take it right up to that pencil line. I'm going to leave a halo around Rocket. So I'll start to work in that halo. I'll fill that in with black in just a little bit here. We'll definitely just let all this be black here. Let's see. We'll have a lot of black here on the bottom part. Maybe a little part here where they will fade to color. So with a space nebula, you're going to have nebulous sort of shapes. We'll fill that in black because I need to finish the panel border there. Maybe a little black here on this side of him that fades to color. Maybe right up through here near this hand. You can just put some spots of black in there because we're going to work from black to gray to color. Put some black in here, maybe leave it just a little open for it to fade to color. And then we're gonna, oops, I got to put that bleeder right through back there so I can go right off the page without worrying about affecting the comic book behind it. Have I ever drawn nebula with a nebula for the background? I think I maybe have. I think I drew the MCU version of Nebula, one of my favorite characters from the MCU. Never thought I'd become such a fan of Nebula, but they did such a great job with her character in the movies, and then Karen Gillan is just amazing as Nebula. Such an interesting character that she is actually one of my favorite characters in the Marvel movies through Guardians and the Infinity War / Endgame movies. All right, then this part will be filled in mostly black. We'll just cut for a little bit of color right there. All right, now these are such small little section, I can just freehand that straight line of the border. Don't really have to use my straight edge for that. So we're just going to fill in this all black. I'm just going to freehand this line because it's such a short line. And then finish off this section right here. So this is stage 1, the blacks. Stage 2 is a neutral gray. And I'm going to go with neutral gray 7. It's a dark neutral gray. I'm going to pull from this black into the open area in these nebulous chunks. All the while leaving a halo, a little white line that runs all the way around Rocket so that he pops off of the background. It's kind of the same mentality I use when I put the white outline around my characters on my Post-it note sketches with the white gel pen, which I could do that here, but it's easier just to leave an outline around Rocket and less risk of covering up the line art by going over it with the gel pen. And it also saves my gel pen for other illustrations, rather than spending it to outline Rocket here, because this is already white paper, so if I leave a white outline as I color, then I still get the effect without having to use more art materials, ideally. Oops, keep that right there. Another little blotch of dark gray. So you can start to see the nebula shapes coming to life here. I'm going to come in with some neutral gray 4. Still working, just working dark to light, dark to light, dark to light. Starting to really fill in these gaps with this light shade of gray, leaving some just little bits open for some really bright spots for when I start to add the color parts to the nebula. But I got to do all the gray work first because I want it to fade from black to color. And I find this to be the easiest way to blend, is to color light over dark. Because the lighter color is going to blend with that darker color. All right, so pretty much have the space nebula behind him for the most part. That I feel I want it to be. Actually, I see one little spot here. I just want to finish. Just want to really round this out here, this section down here, with the neutral gray 4. Come back and just kind of tighten up that halo. All right. Now for, excuse me, had a couple of sneezes there. I think I might be allergic to the nebula. This is why I can't go into outer space. Now we can add some color behind him, some color to the nebula. So I think what I'm going to do is have some pink and purple that fades over to blue and green. So I'm going to use that RV13, the same color I used inside here. I'm going to put over on this side. I'm going to color over that gray. So it's in the open spots and in the black and over the gray. So it goes from a grayish pink to a pink. And from this pink, it's going to fade to a purple. I'm going to go with a light purple. I'm going to try the V01. So you get this sense of, and so I'm going to color over all the grays, the black, some of that pink, so to get this transition from pink to purple. So it starts to, and so these inks are made to react to each other. So as they start to blend together, it creates this fade of dark to light to, from dark to light. A lot of people say, well, doesn't if you have cheap markers, if you color over black with like your yellow, then you get black in the tip of your yellow. So every time you use yellow, you get this streak of black. So I just colored over this black with this light purple marker. But as you can see here, there's no black inside of there. It's very rare for the dark color to infect the tip of a light color with Copic markers. If it does happen, sometimes you can work it out and it'll be okay. If you have to replace the nib, you just pop it out and then you can put in a new one. And I have some spare ones right here. See, these are the spare nibs that I can just replace and put in there. You have to make sure you get the super brush nibs to go in there. You have to get the right kind of nib for the right kind of marker. So you gotta make sure you purchase the right kind. So you can always replace the nibs if they just get really bad. Sometimes they get worn out and they lose their firmness, and that's another reason I would replace my nibs. So that BG34 that we used here as one of the colors we used here in his pouches, I want to use that here in the space nebula behind him. Just to kind of keep it thematic and tonal, so of the colors. And we're going to merge this bluish green to that B01, that kind of bright shade of light blue that I used in parts over here, I'm going to use that over here so it kind of balances out. So we have the purples and pinks over here, purples and pinks over here. Bluish and greenish over here, going to have that over here for balance. This is the way. And just color over that gray. It makes us subtle. We want a subtle transition. That's why we start dark and work towards light, so we can color over with those colors. And so that those colors will blend, and you get these really nice transitions from black to kind of darkish green through the gray into the lighter green. Same with the pinks and the purples. Now, what is a space nebula without stars? We've got to drop in some stars here. So I'm just going to take my Uniball Signo white gel pen. Actually, I'm running out. I need to order some more. But I think I have enough to do some stars here. Yep, there's still ink in this one. I'm just going to kind of start dotting in some stars. Now, ideally, I like my star patterns to be random. I don't want to do equidistant stars all the way through, because I think that's kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of boring. Because if you look up in the sky, they're not equidistant. They're clustered. There are big stars. There are small stars. And they're random. They're random up there. But this is not random. What I'm doing is not truly random. I can create the illusion of random, but it's not truly random because I have control here. So I'm creating these stars. Actually, I see I needed to fill in a little bit more right there. Didn't finish off the halo fully, so I'll just grab my 01 blue. Just finish off that part of the halo there. It was too big of a gap. So I'm having to create the illusion of being random. So I try to think about where can I cluster them and where can I have big open spots. But I don't want every star to be equidistant from the other star. The exact same amount of size and space in between each star. I don't want too many of the same stars, same sized stars right next to each other. And I also have to be careful about how I cluster my stars. Now, if I wanted to, I could mask off, like when I say mask off, it's like cover up Rocket, cover up everything there, and then I could get some white paint on a toothbrush and kind of fleck it. That's another way to do it. And then that's truly random. And that creates a really great star effect. But that's also really messy and requires a bit of extra work. And I don't really have any white paint that is fleckable right now. One other option is liquid frisket, which is this kind of rubbery substance, which is also very messy. Make sure you're wearing a smock or your grungy clothes when working with liquid frisket. It will ruin your clothes if you get on there. It gets on there. I take it and I can, with a toothbrush, fleck it all over the area where I want space. Wait for it to dry. Once it's dry, it's just this kind of rubber that sits on top of the paper. Then I could go in, usually I add my black ink whenever I do it for my comic books or covers. And then once the ink is dried, everything is now dry, I go and I can take my kneaded art gum eraser and I can erase all that rubbery liquid frisket, and it pulls off the board and it kind of masked where the white of the board was. So you have this natural, chaotic white star pattern, random star pattern, which can look really, really cool. But for all intents and purposes, this works pretty well. I like to create some big stars here and there. Maybe a medium-sized star near a big star. So just kind of peppering these through. And I want to make sure that all the big stars don't line up in one line. So I kind of want to stagger them whenever and wherever I can. To give that illusion of randomness. So I just go through and then we come over onto this side. Just let them dot around. Kind of takes some patience, but I think the end product is worth it. And just let the stars dot over the black area, the gray area, and the color area. Thanks for all the kind words. I'm so glad y'all are liking what I'm doing here. This has been a fun 2 days working on this Rocket Raccoon sketch cover. I've had this cover for quite some time now and just have never taken the time to draw a picture of Rocket on here, and I thought this would be a good time to do it, give us something different. So just keep dotting through here. Big clusters, small clusters, random single stars with few stars around it can help make that illusion of randomness. Now there's one other trick I like to do when I create my star patterns. I like to put a couple of stars kind of gleaming in the background. So I'm going to take this side is pretty much dry, so I can safely take my straight edge here, my drafting tool, and then I can do a line vertically. Got to be very careful not to smudge this because it takes gel pen a little time to dry. Just kind of hold it very close to it, not even really on it, because I don't want to smudge it, and do a vertical line. So that puts one gleaming star in the background there. I'm going to let that gleam dry. I'm going to put one over here. So we have one up high. So the other one I don't want to put up high because that would be too symmetrical. I want to come down low, and I have this one big star right there. That's where I want to put this side's gleam. So I could choose not to even do a gleam on this side, but I like drawing gleams, so I want to gleam this one out. I'm a gleamster. So vertical line, line it up with my panel border, and horizontal line. But I'm not quite done yet. There's still one more effect I can do to these gleams, which is a fun little bit of eye candy, aka the detail, is take my circle template and draw not a full circle, but just a partial circle, kind of leaving it open on one side to give it a little bit of a lens flare. I can do that with this side too, maybe a bigger circle. Maybe not that big of a circle, just a little bit bigger than the other circle. Just draw a portion of the circle, not the full circle, but just a portion. It gives us a couple of gleaming stars in here. Let's see, I want to take my smaller gel pen. For tinier details, I use a Jelly Roll white gel pen. Just want to put a little bonus highlight here on the other side of Rocket's eyes, just to give him a little more spark. And I want to put some highlights in the pistils here. So I'm back to the Uniball Signo white gel pen, just adding some white highlights through there. Kind of where the color meets the white. I can just drop in some nice white shapes here. Kind of creates a little more of that eye candy for the viewer. Oh, and then one thing I thought might be fun is drawing some spittle here in Rocket's mouth. So pulling with the the Uniball Signo. Can dot in some spittle there in Rocket's mouth because he is just that angry. So now we can put the date on here. So today is the 15th of May. It is the 15th, right? Yes, yes it is. Good, good, good. 2020. I could just put my signature right through there. Oh, let's just finish off his toes right there. I meant to do that yesterday. There we go. Let's pull the camera back so you can see Rocket in his entirety. There we go. There's the finished colored Rocket Raccoon sketch cover. Original art right there. Hopefully, if you just tuned in and you haven't seen my videos before, we did the line art yesterday, so you can see that still here on my channel. And then here we just finished the colors. And if you did just discover my channel, why don't you just go ahead and click subscribe so you don't miss out on future art live streams and art videos that I upload every now and again. So let's flip the camera around and we can wrap up today's live stream. Hey gang, let me click back into the rig. Boop. All right, so good to hang out with y'all here and wrap up week 9. There will be a shot of Rocket on my social media. I'll have a direct link to come in the video description below, but I have all my social media links in the video description. So if you're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, come give me a follow on all those social media platforms. If you're on there, come follow me. Let's all hang out. So gang, I hope you had a good time. I know I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Live viewers, thank you so much for your comments. If you're watching on replay, feel free to leave a comment in the video section below. I appreciate that. I at least try to read them, answer them when I can, but I at least read your comments, so it really means a lot. Thank you for that. If you liked what you saw, leave me a thumbs up. If you know of a Rocket Raccoon fan out there that might like to see these art videos of this piece of art coming to life, feel free to share my videos. Share it to your Facebook page, share it to your Twitter account. It really goes a long way. I really do appreciate that kind of support. That's huge support. Just sharing my videos means a lot. So, gang, I hope you have a great weekend. Please stay safe. Please stay well. Please wash your hands. And yeah, I hope you have a good time this weekend, wherever you are in the world during this COVID-19 sort of season. Such a weird time in life. But you know what? We're going to get through it just bit by bit, day by day. Just doing the things we need to do. And one thing, wash those hands. Maybe wear a mask when we go out to run errands or whatever, just to play it safe, because you just never know. You never know. Hopefully this will all run its course soon and we'll get back to as much of a normal life as possible, but I believe we can get there if we just keep plugging away. Gang, I'll see you next week. We'll have some art live streams, at least Monday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. We'll see what Tuesday and Wednesday looks like. Depends on my schedule. But we'll at least try to do 3 art live streams next week. We'll see how things go. I'll have more information for you on Monday. But till then, I'll see you soon. I'm Todd Nauck. Keep on drawing. Keep having fun. Take care. Stay well, everybody. Bye-bye.